Special thanks to all the sponsors of the Myth Information Conference 3 in October. Author of the new book, Mythos Christos, Edwin Herbert, Atheist Republic, Godless Engineer, Kenosha Racine Area Freethinkers, Atheist Community of Milwaukee, Freedom from Religion Foundation, the Atheist Alliance of America, the Sophia Wolf Quadracci Memorial Fund for Stem Cell Research. And please remember that your purchase of a $300 sponsorship table for the event includes 1 ticket to the conference and 1 ticket to the VIP party, and also gets you mentions on all of our social media platforms as well as this podcast. And a very special shout out and thank you to all of our patrons who support the show. Welcome back live, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. I'm your host, Rob Moore, flying kind of solo today. I always have my friends jumping in as we keep an all-seeing eye of Horus on the secular movement. It's a beautiful early summer day here in Milwaukee, better than expected. 70 degrees, beautiful, sunshiny, and a Mother's Day as we do our podcast. As always, here from the Grand Avenue Mall location, the Milwaukee Cooperative Space. Come on down and check us out every Sunday at 2 o'clock as we do the show live. And today, as mentioned, is Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. And thanks for joining us. We appreciate everybody taking a little time to spend with us on a special Mother's Day holiday. We know everybody's busy, so thanks for that. I don't know which point at, Sean. Go ahead, Sean. Sean Frasek, producer, is joining me in lieu of Brian Edward this week. What's going on, Sean?
Not much. Just excited. I'm handing you a very lengthy bio that I wanted you to read.
Yeah, well, no, not at all. And today's guest, we're really excited to have. She is, in fact, Cara Santa Maria, a Los Angeles area Emmy and Knight Foundation award-winning journalist, science communicator, television personality, producer, and podcaster. The list goes on and on. A true Renaissance woman and a rock star in our little movement here. Without further ado, then, let's say hi to Cara. Thanks for joining us, Cara. You there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks.
Very good. Excited to have you. You were, like I said, an absolute rock star in the movement with more irons in the fire than we can possibly mention here. Makes us all feel ashamed about our own efforts.
No,
but
not at all.
Let's start right with that. What's it like to be you? What's a day in the life of Cara Santa Maria? What do you consider yourself? What's the primary thing? Are you all of these things? Tell us what it's like.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would consider myself to be all of those things, but I would usually rewrite the order of the list. You know, there's like the forward-facing bio so that you can get good work. But for me, I would probably prioritize science communication. I think that underpins almost everything that I do. So whether I'm doing my own podcast, Talk Nerdy, or co-hosting on the Skeptics Guide to the Universe, or doing a lot of the TV work that I do, I'm always thinking about how I can improve science literacy and kind of going through, a side door to be able to do that.
I think everybody appreciates that. Science education is one of my pet peeves. I don't know what happened. I'm a little bit older than some of the folks that I work with, but I remember when science was cool in the 60s and the 70s, and Omni magazine came out, it got started, and people were excited about new discoveries, and they had faith, if you will, in what the people who were trained to learn these things and discover these things told us. And all of a sudden, it seemed sometime in the 80s came along kind of a conservative wave, sort of followed me through high school with the Reagan years and the Just Say No and the religious right exerting their influence on government. But at what point, Cara, do you have any perspective on this? At what point did science become uncool, and how do we change that?
Well, I think it was exactly, when you mentioned, it was before I was born, definitely. I was born in 1983, so I'm 32 years old,
Bragger.
And I think that I grew up. Yeah. Oh, I'm so young. I think I grew up in a culture of science being, nerdy, and not the way we use the word now. In a lot of ways, we're trying to rebrand the word nerd to be something cool. But you were kind of made fun of if you were a science geek, and you were, called names. And also, I think there was a greater culture of science being sort of embarrassing or left to these like loser type old white men wearing lab coats and doing nefarious things. There's always been this weird distrust of science in the media. They're such a historically, scary sort of protagonist in films, the mad scientist. But the truth of the matter is, I actually think that we are in a Renaissance period that's looking up. I think that we are living in a culture now where technology and computing is so central. Kids are growing up learning how to code in, elementary and middle school, and people want to understand how to use all of the high-tech equipment that they have around them. And I think that they're starting to understand this stuff doesn't make itself. This stuff doesn't research itself. There are real rock stars behind producing all of the incredible technology that's making our lives so much more interesting and so much more connected. So in my view, I'm really starting to see a change. I meet young people all the time who aren't afraid to be like, I love science. Science is cool. And their friends think it's cool. The White House Science Fair really helped. There have been a lot of great initiatives to bring that back. But we don't live in the 60s, and there's not a Cold War, and we're not in a space race. I actually kind of like that this new resurgence of science is happening because of internal pressures, not so much because of external pressures.
That's great. And what about science, Cara, inspired you to delve into it, to go from your childhood to say, wow, this is a really interesting endeavor. I want to learn more about this, because even now, today, we try to inspire in education more women into science fields. So you've definitely grown up in that era as well, where we still see that we need to put an effort for women to really see themselves as scientists and be okay with that.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I was your stereotypical student that we are trying to reach. I did not think that I was ever going to be interested in science. I thought that I was bad at math. I thought that I was bad at biology, chemistry, physics. They all scared me an awful lot. So when I started in school, I avoided my science courses like the plague. I originally went to college to study vocal jazz performance. I was a singer all through high school, and that's what I thought I was going to do with my life. I ultimately ended up leaving that because I really didn't enjoy all of the piano and the theory courses. It started to suck the fun out of the art for me. And I ended up majoring in psychology because, to be perfectly honest, because I thought it would be easy. It seemed like an easy degree that I could get through quickly, that I didn't have to put too much effort into. And while I was studying psychology, I was very lucky to have a handful of brilliant professors who taught me about research design, who taught me about experimental psychology, and I also started working for a clinical neuropsychologist. I met a lot of really interesting patients with really interesting types of brain damage. It was a very sensitive and emotional experience for me, but it was also one that was just endlessly fascinating. I was also very inspired by Oliver Sacks and a lot of the books that he was writing at the time. And ultimately, I decided after I got my undergrad that I needed to get more education in that field. So I went back for a master's in biology to understand the brain more at the cellular and the systems level. And then went on to start a PhD. I ended up leaving my PhD to pursue science communication full time. At the time, I realized I was loving teaching a little bit more than I was loving doing all of the wet work in the lab. So I think for me, I chose the right path ultimately. But I'll tell you what, when I was in college, in undergrad, I took 3 science classes, the bare minimum. I took astronomy, thought it would be easy.
Yeah, right.
Oceanography, really thought that would be easy. Then when I realized it wasn't about whales, it was about currents and tides, it got really complicated pretty quickly. And then lastly, I legit took a class. I like to say I took paleontology. I'm a lifelong lover of dinosaurs. But no, in the course guide, it was literally listed as dinosaurs in all capital letters with an exclamation point at the end. When I was in college, I took dinosaurs. And that was my approach to science. I was every young girl that I'm now working to try to reach.
Well, very cool. The only similar background that I would have for that is I graduated with a microbiology, bacteriology degree, but in terms of geology, I took a course that was labeled Rocks for Jocks because I thought it would be easy. But no, the football players found it difficult too.
I made the astronomy mistake. I thought astronomy was going to be easy, and I ended up working with Daniel Schrader, who helped build the Hubble telescope. And within like 3 weeks, I knew that was a mistake. That class,
That's
I was finished.
amazing, though.
Wow.
I actually knew somebody who took a course called Physics for Poets from Carl Sagan.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
Wow.
Speaking of Carl Sagan, one of your heroes, who inspired you as far as science communicators?
You know, I found Carl Sagan later than I think a lot of people do. My earliest inspiration was definitely Oliver Sacks. He, because he was in neuroscience and neurology, actually. He was a clinician. But I read every single book of his voraciously and was just fascinated by what can and does often go wrong with the brain and how tenuous this really is, how much these little things could happen to any of us. I think it really gave me a lot of perspective. And then when I started to pursue science communication more as a career, I had read maybe 1 or 2 books by Carl Sagan, but then I really started to understand how influential he was for the field. You know, I was too young to watch the original Cosmos, so I had to watch it when I was older. And I fell hard, to the extent that I have a quote from Carl Sagan tattooed on my ribs. He's just such an incredible inspiration.
That's great. I think one of the most interesting things about your career is actually the journalism. You've been asked on various platforms to be kind of the science professional or science expert. Huffington Post, the Young Turks, all these from different places. Like, how did you get involved in that? And I'd like to hear about the meeting with Arianna Huffington. That seemed like a really cool experience.
Yeah, I think it really turned when I was living in New York. I'm a Texan, born and raised. I lived there most of my life. And then I moved to New York to start a PhD in clinical neuropsychology. I was there a little over a year. It was very difficult for me. New York was a big cultural shift for me. It was also, I was poor and I was very young. Like, I graduated college at 20, so I started my PhD maybe at 23. And it was because I did a master's in between, and I was broke. Wow. It was really depressing. Like, living in New York was very hard for me. I loved the time I spent at Queens College. I loved my students, but ultimately, through a series of personal events too, I decided to leave the PhD program to pursue science communication full time. One of the first things I ever did in SciComm was I did a pilot for HBO called Talk Nerdy to Me. It was really fun. It was irreverent. We cursed a lot. We got a little bit dirty, but it was always very scientific. More so than a lot of the programming that I see on TV now, which is probably why we didn't get picked up. But Arianna Huffington had seen the pilot, and so she asked me at the time, can you do something like that, but in short form for the web? At the time, the Huffington Post didn't have a science page, and they've always had a really bad track record when it comes to science journalism because there was never a division. They had a health and wellness page, they had a environment page, and an education page. And of course, their model is a hybrid journalistic blogging model, and their bloggers are, only mildly vetted. Pretty much anybody who can write, and it can be comprehensive, can get a blog on Huffington Post. Well, they don't pay either, so that makes it a little harder for them to be as rigid as they can be. And so you would see things like, blogs by Deepak Chopra and Oprah and all, total pseudoscientists, and they would be mixed in with science reporting. And so ultimately, I think she even understood we need to have a science page, like a page that's called Science, where only science reporting lives. And I had, I applauded her for that. And I said, I want to be a part of this. I want to help make a carve out. Huffington Post always had a bad reputation. I thought it was a little unfair because if you go to The Guardian, you also see woo. If you go to the New York Times, you also see woo. You just have to understand that if you can have this pillar of science journalism and try to at least keep the walls of that sort of hallowed, so keep all of the science reporting within the science label, that maybe you can start to work from within the system to affect change. So I was very excited about that, and I worked diligently to do that from the beginnings of the start of the page, being their science correspondent and doing that series, Talk Nerdy to Me Online.
Well,
Ultimately, I don't
go
know
ahead.
if it went the right direction. I think they're trying, and I think that they generally do a very good job. But ultimately, other TV work came, and I had put in my time and left on super good terms.
So you're not with the Huffington Post anymore?
Oh God, no, I left years ago.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's. I think that's. I applaud you for that. I didn't realize the Huffington Post journalists didn't make any money. I had no idea. I always
The
assumed-
journalists do. No, the journalists do for sure. They don't have that many journalists. They mostly have within the company, people have editor titles. I was a rare exception as a correspondent, as a science correspondent. They do have some political correspondents because, of course, that's where they put a lot of their efforts. For the most part, everybody there is an editor, and they also write. Now, if you look at the front page of HuffPo or of any page on HuffPost, the left column, the left and the middle column are generally no. I'm wrong. Just the left column is generally the blog column. So those are volunteer basis pieces, and they're not fully edited. Though bloggers don't get paid, but all of the news reporting, that's not just wire rewrites. Those are all done by staff members, and yes, of course they get paychecks. I got a paycheck for sure.
You mentioned that there's woo in all of those papers and all of those media outposts because I think woo sells. And
Yeah,
you're
of
never going to
course.
get away from that, are we? Or how do we take? I guess as long as there's I hadn't thought about it before, but as long as there's a capitalistic side to religion, is it going to be hard to pry it completely out of American life?
I think the important thing is to make a staunch distinction between journalism and opinion. So I don't really have any issue. Obviously, I'm a skeptic, so and on Skeptics Guide, especially, kind of, I think the niche that I'm starting to carve out for myself is debunking bad journalism. It's taking a science paper and looking at it and looking at how it's been reported and helping kind of cut through the BS so that I can talk about what actually happened in the study. Now, that said, if somebody wants to write a blog post about acupuncture, I really respect the First Amendment. I'm not about to try and take down everybody who states their opinion about things. But the minute that those opinions are stated as fact, the minute that you have institutions backing them in such a way that it's hard for the consumer to tell the difference, that it seems vetted and it seems justified and it seems like the medical establishment or the scientific establishment backs it because it's poorly reported, that's when I start to get really concerned. The public needs to be armed with knowledge, and they need to be able to tell the difference between journalism and pseudo-journalism or science and pseudoscience. And I think it does take sometimes full-time professionals working really hard to make sure that we can help bridge that gap, because if you don't work in this field, it's very hard to tell the difference. A lot of times that's what makes pseudoscience. It's using the scientific sounding words. It's sounding legitimate when it's absolutely not. That's the danger.
And how much of your neuropsychology background do you take with you into the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe?
100%. I mean, I think that the two biggest things that have aided me in my career so far as a science communicator in the media, both on TV and in podcasting and also in the web, are my training as a scientist, actually doing lab work, actually learning how to design experiments, learning how to publish those experiments and use statistics and understand statistics. I mean, those things I use every day. But I think equally, it was my experience working as first a TA, a teaching assistant, and then an adjunct or an assistant teaching assistant, and then moving on to becoming a full adjunct professor. All through my education, I taught, and sometimes my course load kind of struggled because I taught so much. It was not uncommon. I remember the year that I defended my master's thesis, that final semester when I was finishing it, I was teaching 5 classes. It was crazy, but it's where I wanted to be. And I think that teaching has been, invaluable. It's really no different when you talk on a podcast, when you go in front of a live television audience, or when you stand up in front of an anatomy and physiology lab. It's about trying to put yourself and really use empathy to understand, where are people getting stuck? Where are they getting confused? How can I help that light bulb that's already there turn on.
She's Cara Santa Maria. You can find her on Twitter at Cara Santa Maria. You can find us on Twitter at MythicistMKE. Find me on Twitter at Robinero. We want to remind everyone to go to the webpage, mythicistmilwaukee.com, and consider buying a membership. There's a couple ways to do that, and they're all really easy. We've all done it, and it didn't even hurt. And please support us on Patreon, too, as we bring you exciting content from the secular world. None more exciting than today's guest. Outstanding and amazing and incredible to have with us, Cara Santa Maria, soon to be appearing at Reason Rally. Are you getting excited for that?
I am so excited, but I'm still struggling with what I should be talking about. Maybe you guys can give me some
You're not
insight.
ready? You're having to memorize it and you're not ready to go?
Oh, God, no.
How long of a spot are you getting? Do you have any idea?
I think all speakers get 8 minutes.
Wow.
I think that's what I was told. And 8 minutes, I think, is very manageable. But when you're talking in front of 30,000 people, it's a different kind of talk.
Yeah.
You know, it's obviously not a talk where you'd have a PowerPoint, which I generally don't do anyway. It's not a talk where you can sort of circumlocute and, you know, take your time and him and haw. You want to hit every word, and you kind of want to make sure that your talk has more of a rally cry.
Mm-hmm.
I think you want to really inspire the people in the audience to be vocal.
Absolutely.
During the talk.
Catchphrases.
I would almost say,
platitudes.
Exactly.
yeah, I would just say inspire. Just inspire people with the work that you've done, and get women and just everyone involved in science and just everything that it's brought to society and you personally. I think that's one thing that you can bring out to the masses.
I mean, it's
Go ahead.
interesting. You always get stuck, right? What do I talk about? I have such varied interests. We talk about science communication a lot. It's my background, but I'm also incredibly passionate about atheism. I'm incredibly passionate about civil rights, civil liberties, and about the political process. And so I'm always trying to figure out how to hybridize all of these things.
Well, it definitely was a challenge when we were doing the research for this, because it's hard. How do with how many things you've worked on and how vast your resume is, what do you get in on? What do you focus on? But one of the things that I thought was kind of funny and unique for you when I was doing the research, typically we'll have atheists or secular-minded people come on the show, and we just look at the research and we pick topics based on that. But is it weird for you? And I don't know how you feel about this, but when I'm looking up your name, I see Cara Santa Maria, rumored to be with Josh Groban, or rumored to be with this person. Is that been kind of weird for you?
Well, I think that, part of my transition from New York to LA definitely was based on personal choices, relationship choices, and sometimes you fall in love. And I think one of the biggest things that I get in the secular community is questions about my early relationship with Bill Maher. I dated him when I was maybe 24, but for quite a while, for 3 solid years. And he's a divisive figure in the secular movement for sure, because he's been such a huge advocate of atheistic advocacy, right? A lot of atheists really look up to him because he's an outspoken person in relatively mainstream media, really speaking up for atheism and for atheist values. At the same time, he's had many missteps when it comes to science. And as somebody who has, had a personal, intimate relationship with somebody, people often expect you to be them. It's the funniest thing. They're like, yeah, but what about when he said this? It's like, yeah, he said it. I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
I'm
right.
me.
Exactly. Well,
he had his own viewpoints. And ultimately, we did break up. And we have all of these personal conflicts, too. Everybody does. You disagree with people. Doesn't mean that it affects how much you care about them. Doesn't mean it really affects often your relationship. I've known Republicans to be with Democrats.
Yeah, well, that's why it was weird. It's you do so much and you've done so much, and then I see a thread about who you're dating. It's
I know.
It's a distraction for you, I guess.
And
What we're
it's not
getting
just that. I mean, it's not just that. That is one thing. People talking about who I'm dating. Now I'm in a very settled, wonderful relationship, and I'm pretty open about my boyfriend. I might even use anecdotes on the podcast more than my personal life, my dating life, which I generally do keep a little bit separate. It's the it's the stuff about your looks. I mean, people ask me all the time, why is your podcast an audio only podcast? You could do a video podcast. You'd get all these new viewers. Well, I'm like, I don't want to. I'm on TV almost every day. I sit in a makeup chair for like an hour plus. I have people touching my face and putting like hot things in my hair. And then I have to put on the uncomfortable high heels. And it's awful. Like, it's uncomfortable. And so the last thing I want is that when I sit down to have what I consider a serious, elevated, intellectual conversation, that the comment section is full of people talking about my boobs or my choice in t-shirt or, oh, she looks a little tired today. I mean, it's so sad that that is the way that the internet works. So for me, at least with the podcast, it's my one place where it's like, well, you can comment on my voice. By the way, people do. There are forums dedicated to Cara's vocal fry. It's the craziest thing.
Wow.
But beyond that, you know, let's get out of the vein and the superficial and let's talk about the content.
Yeah.
And I think even with the vast array of endeavors that you've taken, I think it really comes down to your passion for just knowledge, even when it comes to political information or atheism or science or just networking. It all really comes down to knowledge for you, and I think that's where it all stems from. You just have this interest, even with oceanography and whatever else it is that you wanted to study in college. You just have this desire to just know the truth, and it seems like that. You know, I won't speak for you. Has taken you to the realm of atheism.
Yeah, well, you know, the funny thing is that I was an atheist long before I found science. So I was raised Mormon, and I left the church at 14 and kind of read a lot of early philosophy. I was sort of a thoughtful, depressed kid. I was really introverted, and I was reading like Nietzsche when I was 13, which is like not healthy. And so I found atheism much, much, much earlier. And I think in many ways I was backward for most people because my atheism informed my scientific thought. I think there's an innate thing in me that questions authority. There's something innate in me that won't settle for just because or because I told you to, that really wants to understand the why. I was a super frustrating kid in my Sunday school classes because of that. But I will tell you that for me, that's what the skeptic movement is it not? It's just wanting to know truth, wanting to get as much knowledge as possible so that you can make the best decisions in your life based on actual evidence, not based on, you know, truthiness, as Colbert would put it, not based on your gut feelings, but based on real, tangible, solid, material evidence. There's such a comfort in that. There's such a comfort in knowing that, oh, my opinions or my beliefs or my thoughts or my anything about this one topic are informed by reading everything I could and by trying to understand what authority figures who have dedicated their lives' work to understanding this topic, looking at what they say about it, comparing what they say about it, understanding the scientific method so that I can read these articles to know whether there is truth behind them or whether they've been manipulated. When you work that hard, you have a real comfort in knowing that the thoughts that you have about things are pretty much as close to reality as you're capable of getting them to be. And knowing they can change. That's even better. New evidence? Oh, might have to change my mind.
Right, and that wasn't an easy decision from you based on what I've learned. You had a kind of a struggle with your father in the sense of coming out as an atheist. Is that correct?
Oh, for sure. I mean, when you are raised, I'm sure you have Mormon listeners or foreman, right? Former Mormon listeners.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Especially being in the Midwest. I mean, this is something that Mormons are everywhere. Don't get me wrong. And people think, oh, but it's Utah and maybe Vegas. Vegas is the next big population. But no, I mean, the Mormons are huge in Idaho. They're huge in a lot of Midwestern states, and they're huge in the South. And I was literally on the buckle of the Bible Belt when I was growing up in those suburbs of Dallas, Texas. Woo. Everyone is religious in the South. Everyone. It is so rare. I don't know if I knew any atheists when I was growing up. I definitely didn't have any atheist role models. And it's really tough. So coming out as an atheist alone in a culture that is not okay with it is a very scary experience. But I often liken it into coming out of the closet as someone who's LGBTQ. There is a certain point where you feel like you're lying both to yourself and to everyone around you so blatantly that it's so deceptive that you feel, I don't know, like a bad person, like you feel guilty about it. And I remember coming to my father when I was young and saying, I have questions. And he, was like, read these books, pray about it. He never really gave me satisfactory answers or even held my hand through exploring. It just wasn't that culture. And so when I finally said, I don't believe in God, it's not just that the Mormon thing isn't working for me. I kind of don't think any of this is real. He was like, listen, I have a moral obligation to God to force you to go to church until you're 18 years old, as long as you live under my roof. My parents had joint custody. I was most of the time with my mother at the time and sometimes with my father. And in my mind at the time, he was giving me a choice. He was saying, you either stay with me and pretend to the world that you're Mormon and keep a straight face about it for many. And at the time when you're 14, 4 years is such a long time to feel like you have to wait. Or he was saying, kindly bow out. And I remember saying to him at 14, I'm sure that if we went to the courts right now and I said that I would choose to stay with my mom, like I'm at an age of consent. I'm very well spoken. Obviously, I was a precocious kid. I was always in these like advanced gifted and talented courses. I'm sure I could have charmed the pants off of a judge. And my dad was like, listen, that's your choice. You want to go live with your mom, you live with your mom. So I did. And I never saw him for many, many years. And it caused a big rift. A really big rift between us. We've since come back together. We can even talk about our differences more now. I think as he's gotten older, and he's an incredible man. He and his wife have adopted many, many children. They've gone through a lot of hardships with the adoption processes. I think that he softened a bit with age. I was really his first rebellious child. My older sister was more by the book. So I think that I was a big trial period for him, but it was very hard. I mean, for any child. And at 14, you're a child,
14,
as much as you want to believe you're not. I started college at 16. So like I was one of these kids who didn't really have a childhood, grew up too fast and made a lot of mistakes thinking that I was more grown up than I was. But either way, regardless of where you are in your life, at 14, you're a kid. You're not really in a position to be making those kinds of decisions.
It's shocking to me that it was easier to come out to your mom than your Mormon dad. You have some family and friends in Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rican Catholics don't take kindly to atheism either. What was my mom was okay?
No,
with,
that's true. You know what, my mom? Yeah, my mom is a super cool chick. So my mom and my dad were actually both Catholic. My dad's Italian, my mom's Puerto Rican. So of course they were both Catholic. They converted together. So they converted, joined the church, got married, had the kids, and then divorced soon after. And after my mom divorced, she just kind of stopped going. And I didn't really know what was going on, but my mom was really there for me when I started struggling, and I would talk to her about it. My mom's also very, very bright. And I would say, this is how I feel, blah, blah, blah. What do you think? What do you believe? And in so many words, I'm pretty sure that my mom probably closely identifies as a secular humanist. I don't think she believes in anything, any sort of conscious greater power. I'm not sure if she would go so far as to call herself an atheist, only because there might still be a little bit of the like woo in there, a little bit of the spiritual stuff, the holdover stuff. And it's not her movement. It's not her mission. But my mom, more than anything, just always supported me being me, on this Mother's Day. I just remembered. I have to say, she's just been my biggest supporter my entire life. And I really appreciated having her there as a rock, because I think if I didn't, I'm not sure how possible it would have been for me to be able to find myself and continue on that path at such a young age.
Happy Mother's Day, Mom. Go ahead, Antonio.
Yeah, no, I going back again just to tie it into your past studies to this neuropsychology piece. Now, seeing here that it says that you've been open. Now, I don't know how true this is because it's Wikipedia, but it says you've been open with some struggles with depression. What message would you give to other individuals that may want to come out but are feeling pressured by society or others, or feeling uncomfortable with what they believe. What message or what strategies would you give to others to be able to move forward and be okay with who they are?
Sure. Yeah, this is a really complicated topic, right? And it is true. I think Wikipedia did get that one thing right. I am, I carry a diagnosis of major depressive disorder, moderate. So I have been in therapy almost my whole life. That was one thing my parents really did right, was even from the time they were getting divorced, when I was 6 or 7, they started putting me into therapy. Granted, when I was young, they put me in Mormon therapy, which is probably more detrimental than being not in therapy. But ultimately, I found therapists I trusted. I've been through that process my whole life. I absolutely respect and adore my therapist now, and he's helped me through a lot. I also take medication. I take citalopram every day, which is an SSRI. And I try to be very open in an effort to help do my small part to erase the stigma around mental illness. We live in a culture that treats individuals who struggle with mental illness as if they are struggling with a disorder of will. And it's very difficult to overcome the internal guilt and grief that comes along with that. And it's not just because, one person will say something here, one person will say something there, but it's a overarching cultural, landscape that people who are depressed, well, why don't you just think more positively? Or you should you should hike more, or you should exercise more. If you eat more vegetables, blah, blah, blah. It's all these things that you could will yourself away from it. And depression just doesn't work that way. It's a neurological illness. And many, many individuals who struggle with depression, anxiety, other types of psychiatric disorders, whether they're mood disorders, whether they're personality disorders, or even psychotic disorders, there is a lot of pressure to just snap yourself out of it. People who don't understand, who have never been there, are in many instances really lacking the empathy when it comes along with that. Now combine that with an individual who is struggling with trying to come out as who they are, whether it's coming out as LGBTQ, whether it's coming out as atheist, or any other personal experience that maybe society hasn't caught on to as being normative. My advice is always, you don't have to if you don't want to, and you absolutely shouldn't if you don't think it's safe. But if you can, and if you feel strong enough, and if you feel like you'll be able to push through, when you come out and you're outspoken about it, you're paving the way for other people who are in a position where they can't. So it's not a one-size-fits-all scenario. I'm very lucky. I'm in the media. I feel relatively protected and safe. I have incredible friends and actually a pretty supportive family. I can talk about my struggles with depression openly. I can talk about my atheism openly. And yes, I take horrible hits online. People are disgusting. People are really, really nasty. Read the YouTube comments under anything where I get very personal, and it's hard. But that being said, I'm in a position where I can do this, and I take it as a really, intense responsibility, because there are a lot of people who aren't in that position. And what keeps me going every day is the messages and the emails that I get from people that say, you speaking so frankly about your experiences cutting, or when you talked on that one podcast about suicidal ideation, or, anything like that. They're like, that spoke to me and it made me feel stronger just to know that I'm not alone, or I'm thinking about getting treatment now, or I finally told my parents that I'm struggling. These kinds of things, gosh, I'm going to get choked up just talking about it. They're why I keep doing it, because I can. It's not that hard for me in the grand scheme of things. It's very difficult for some people. And for those who feel like it would be unsafe, you don't have to. You don't have to come out. It's okay. I know it's a struggle, but you wait until you feel safe enough. Nobody has that expectation of you, and it is not your responsibility. Your only responsibility is to yourself.
She's Cara Santa Maria. She helps people gain acceptance as science geeks. She helps people come out as atheists. She helps people come out as sufferers of mental illness. What seriously? What is it that you? What is it you don't? Can you help me come out as a bald man? Can you help me gain acceptance?
That's one of the questions. It's like, what haven't you done, and what are some goals for you? It's like, if you're going to set like a 5-year plan, it's like, well, you're already taking care of everything in the world, I think. So.
Tell us a little bit about being a correspondent for Real Future on Fusion.
Yeah, that was a fun show. We did a season on that. It was really great. I got to go out and interview a lot of interesting people, tell a lot of really interesting stories, and the production company, Citizen Jones, they're just wonderful storytellers. Those shows are really cinematic. They're beautiful, and you can watch all the episodes online through Fusion. They originally aired on Fusion, but they also aired on the web. These are the kinds of things that I often do. Sometimes they're one-offs. I don't know if that will ever go forward. I don't know if they'll get another season. If so, I would love to be involved. If not, it might just be those episodes, and then that was the end of it. I spent many years as a TechKnow, which was a show on Al Jazeera America celebrating science. And that was also an awful lot of fun. Right now, I actually work on a kids show on Saturday mornings on Fox called FabLab.
Yeah.
It's specifically targeted towards girls.
That's
kind
awesome.
of age 9 to 13. Yeah, to get them excited about science. They're generally the group that we're the worst at reaching. So we're trying to make sure that we reach out to them. I also work on a local news show called SoCal Connected here on our public television network, KCET in Los Angeles. And in that show, I get to spread my wings a little. I don't do pure science. I do a lot more civil rights, civil justice. I'm doing a story right now about gentrification in Venice. I did a story this season about sex trafficking of local girls, which is a huge problem in Los Angeles. But I think if I were to look to the future and think about my plans, it would be it's more of my hopes than my actual goals. I have to work within the system. I want to make waves, and the best way to make waves is to get in the places where the eyeballs are. I don't like preaching to the choir. I think I do it to some extent on my podcast, and I do love my podcast, and I love my podcast listeners, and it keeps me sane because I'm my own producer, and I don't have to answer to anybody, so I can talk about whatever I want. But that said, when I go on a TV show that has millions of viewers, I'm reaching people that don't think about this stuff all the time. So my passion and my goal, and I guess my hope, would be to help see science, and not just science, civil rights, civil justice, just intellectual television, thoughtful television, like we often see in the UK, like we often see in Canada, coming back to our airwaves. And so that's what I'm always working towards, being able to tell the show without having to answer to the network executives to say, you need to dumb this down, or let's make this a little less heady. Like, I want to be able to do a heady show on TV and know that there's an audience for that. I know they're out there. And I want to be able to convince the network executives and the production companies to stop watering things down, to try and reach as many people as possible, and to try to, as I always say in SciComm, never underestimate the intelligence of your audience. Just always underestimate their vocabulary. That's really what it comes down to. If you're not a scientist, you don't know what these words mean. So you don't have to use the big words. That doesn't mean that you can't talk about the topics at the same, interesting and inspiring and intellectual level. People will get it. People are a lot smarter than we often give them credit for in the media.
It's the Mythicist Milwaukee Show. It's 2:45. It's time for a little feature we like to call Myth of the Day. And here to present Myth of the Day, you've heard him speak today as we are missing our normal co-host. It's Antonio. He is, in fact, the Rico Suave of ritualized superstition. Get around that one. Take it away, Antonio. Myth of the day.
Well, thank you again, Cara, for being on the show today. I'd like to say thank you to the individuals that have retweeted or liked your appearance on today's show. Little Maylee, free-thinking woman of Michigan, atheist friend finder, and a BA in evolutionary psychology. Lawrence Yufa, Joseph Allen, also PZ Meyer, and Miguel Connor of Aeon Byte Radio. Our myth of the day is a Did You Know? And it's related to today's guest. In Mormonism, it was accepted and taught for 150 years that people who were born with dark skin, specifically African Americans, were cursed for not choosing to fight a mythical war against the Mormon Jesus' brother Lucifer. It is explained in Mormon scripture that the quote-unquote Council of the Gods were planning on how to redeem mankind on earth. The Mormon Jesus desired to save man by giving them their free choice. However, Lucifer objected and wanted to force men to serve God. The gods rejected Lucifer's plan, which resulted in a war. The group of spirits that were less valiant in this war were cursed by the Mormon god Elohim to be born on earth with black skin. In Mormonism, the founder, Joseph Smith, is accepted to have done more for humanity than Jesus Christ himself. What does Joseph Smith have to say about people with dark skin? Quote, unquote, had I anything to do with the Negro, I would confine them by strict law to their own species and put them on a national equalization. And that is today's myth of the day.
Ouch.
Ouch. Thank you. And I imagine that probably changed about the time that the Mormon Church realized that black people have money to spend too.
Right.
It was, but yeah, it was later than you would hope. It was like the 70s, 80s,
Yeah.
and even like when I was growing up, I want to say there was 2 black people in our congregation.
Wow.
And I was even thinking to myself, like, I wouldn't want to be here if I were you.
Right.
And they still couldn't be leaders. They couldn't be heads of the church. That was interesting.
Well, and that's something that we struggled with. I mean, that was one of the earliest things that got me thinking, I'm a woman. And women in the church are so denigrated. They're treated. I remember going to my sister's wedding, and which you usually can't do because you usually get married in the temple, but they had some transgressions. And so they got married by their bishop up in just in the church. And I remember just bawling my eyes out because there was this whole thing of like, do you, David, promise to, respect and uphold the law of the land and the law of your Lord Jesus Christ? And do you promise to, serve him in everything you do? I do. Do you, Audra, promise to uphold and serve your husband in everything he does? And I remember talking to my dad, like, that is effed up.
Yeah.
Like, I am not okay with that. And he was like, well, it's like, because we have a direct connection to our Lord and as men who hold the priesthood, but women, you have a direct connection too, just through us. And I was just like, I can't, your double speak is just so
That's direct.
It was all on the golden plates. All of that.
Yeah,
was there, right?
totally. Yeah. Dumb.
You are a science communicator first. We've well established that, and that goes hand in hand with Reason Rally's message of using rationalism and reason to influence decisions, especially in our politics in this country. And you wrote the foreword to Dave Silverman's book, Fighting God. We all know and love him for his firebrand atheism. You as a science communicator first, where do you see yourself in that atheist activist spectrum?
Yeah, it's interesting. I talked to Dave at great length about this. I even had him on my podcast on Talk Nerdy recently to have this very conversation. I've had him on twice now, and one before I wrote the foreword and one after. And I am absolutely not David Silverman. Like, I will tell you that hands down. His approach is so not my approach. That said, I have always said that it takes all types. The only way for a movement to be successful is if there are multiple leaders within the movement who approach it in different ways, because people aren't monolithic. David's approach is so inspiring and so unifying for some people and so off-putting for other people. Like, there are people who hate David because they think that he's bad for the movement. And there are other people who are like, without David, we wouldn't have a movement. And that's the important thing. I do think that people have to be really aggressive to be on the bleeding edge. Otherwise, we'll all kind of hang out in the middle and we won't see progress happening as quickly. But I also think that there are people needed that have a kinder, gentler approach, that have a more understanding approach. And then there are people that are needed that maybe don't even use the word atheism. I mean, that's something that I struggle with. I don't struggle using the word. I'm an out loud and proud atheism, but I always struggle with the viewpoint that, like, unless you're willing to call yourself an atheist, you're not really helping with the movement. Like, I don't think that that's true necessarily, although I would like to see more people use the label and then show with their actions and their deeds that being an atheist means being a civic leader and an upstanding citizen and a kind human being. I don't think that needs to be reserved for the humanists, and then the atheists should all just be jerks. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think we need to see more blending and more mixing there. But we saw it, and we continue to see it with the LGBTQ movement. We see people on the bleeding edge, on the front lines, fighting every day for what they believe. And then we see everyday people, telling the people that are close to them that they have questions or that they have instincts and that they want to explore these ideas about themselves and about society. all of those things are important for the movement. You know, people who are on the air are important for the movement. People who are listening to this transmission are important for the movement.
Yeah, one of the things David was talking about, we just had him on last week, and he was talking about the A-list celebrities and how excited he was for that. And you being a celebrity yourself, I mean, you've hung out with these people, you've talked to these people. Does this topic come up? Does like religion and atheism, is that part of like the conversation?
It's interesting, you know, because I am not a celebrity by any stretch. I have
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are.
Can we have another one, Rob? Can you say yes, you are?
Compared to us,
We're gonna edit that out. So yeah.
You know what? No, I have my friends that I keep. I have a really normal life. When I was dating Bill, for example, I met a lot of celebrities. That's when I really dipped my toe into celebrity culture, and it was weird. I would go to parties where everybody there was super famous, and it was like, oh my God, this is the strangest feeling ever. And there is something very specific about Bill that he is very famous amongst the famous. And I think it's because he himself is a pretty intellectual thinker, and he has had a reputation for a long time of being very no holds barred. And so you would have a lot of actors or individuals who have to play other people on TV all the time who really keep their personal lives private and who don't have an outlet for activism or for speaking their minds, flocking to Bill and wanting to talk to him about all of these things. So I met many people who were not public atheists who spoke about atheism quite candidly behind closed doors. I don't know how often, though, that topic comes up in polite conversation. I'm assuming it's just like anything else, you know. Celebrities are normal people that just have a lot of money and have to maintain their privacy. But they're people. Like, when you meet them, like, they don't have wings or anything, you know. So the conversations that they have are very similar to the conversations other people have. They talk about work. They talk about work-life balance. They talk about politics, and yes, sometimes they talk about religion, but they have family members who they can't talk about religion or politics with. They have people in their lives who they think it's uncomfortable to broach the subjects with. But as a general rule, Los Angeles is super liberal. Like, I live in a progressive society, and 90% of my friends are atheists. And you just start to tend to keep the company that's similar to you when you're young and you're making friends. I do find that it's a heavy topic of conversation amongst my peer group. A lot of my friends are Caltech grads. A lot of my friends are JPL employees, SpaceX employees, Hyperloop employees, the types of people who have dedicated their lives to science. And oftentimes, along with that comes a strong skeptical mindset. So we talk about it all the time. I love talking about it.
Yeah,
I actually got in trouble the other day, a couple years ago, because we were going, not in trouble, but I felt really guilty. We were going to a telescope in Mount Wilson to do some observations. We all pitched in money, and a big group of friends went together, and we planned it for Easter. And I remember everybody planning, and one person goes, "Oh no, it's Easter." And I was like, "What does that matter? None of us care about that." And one of my friends was like, "I have to go to church." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I just forget. I forget that people even go to church."
Wow.
Because like that's my peer group. But that doesn't mean that I don't know what it's like to be fully entrenched, because I lived in Texas until I was 25 years old, 24. 22. I don't know. But that was my whole life. You know, I lived in the Bible Belt where I had never met an atheist or a Jew. I knew 2 Jews. I apologize. Growing up, that was it. Then I moved to New York and LA, where everyone I know is a Jewish atheist.
Well,
you know, it's like a totally different culture.
Oh, it's actually funny that you mentioned LA, because we're filming a movie. It's a big project for us, and we're looking for churches to partner with. And we were looking in the Midwest, in our area in Wisconsin, Illinois. Nobody wanted to partner with us. They're like, this is sacrilegious, blah, blah, blah. And then we looked in LA to do the shot, and it was so funny. Like, the LA churches, like, they must really, like, there's a business there. There's some kind of revenue stream, because they're like, yeah, absolutely. They have the rates, they have all that. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, it's weird. It's a weird hybridization, right? Because we have so much TV and film is done here that any given day you're walking down the street, you walk by a film crew, like a big grip truck, and people need locations. It's common. You need locations. So people who are willing to do that, they have location rates, and they signed the location releases and they know all of the legal proceedings behind that. That said, there's also kind of a cool religious movement going on in LA where you do have your more sort of, I don't know, maybe there's some fundamentalist churches. There have to be. I've never seen them, but there have to be. And then you have your more orthodox places. And then you have these super cool churches. There's like a Methodist church, I think straight up Highland around Hollywood Boulevard, that has the big HIV/AIDS ribbon on the front of the church. You've probably seen images of it. That is just so pro LGBT inclusion. Like, it's a progressive town, and it's a town that has a massive gay population, right? Like Santa Monica Boulevard, the gayborhood, like we're known for that in West Hollywood. And so they get it. They get it. Like, you have to include people if you want to be able to continue your religion, and you have to not make people feel bad about themselves. So I think that a lot of people here have managed to adapt Christianity to be much more of a philosophy, much more progressive, much less fundamentalist, and it works for people.
Well, I guess on a side topic, but we'll connect it to LA. How was it to win the Los Angeles area Emmy and I guess another award that you've received, the Knight Foundation Award? Could you speak to those?
Yeah, I've been really lucky. One of the shows that I work on, SoCal Connected, which is a local show here, we are a news magazine style show, and we talk about just things that are important to Southern California, but also to the world. Like, we try to make sure that our stories, even though they're local to LA, like the sex trafficking story that I did, obviously it has legs everywhere because it's a huge problem worldwide. So we work really hard at that, and with very limited resources, because KCET is a public television station. So we don't have commercials. We are supported by viewers like you. So we've worked hard. Last year, it was the first year I had worked on the show. I'm in my second season now. They've been on the air for, I think, 8 or 9 years. I was nominated for a bunch of local Emmys. We went down. The show won a couple, but I think we won 3 total, one for my anchor and one for my producer, on a story that they did about over-medicating the elderly, if I'm remembering correctly. And then I was up for one in my feature category, and I won. It blew me away. I was up against some veteran reporters. And so it was for a story that I did on a local initiative here at the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles County, my local museum that I love so much. They do a big citizen science program where they put malaise traps, which are these types of insect traps, big insect traps, in a handful of people's backyards all over the town. And they caught bugs, and then they started sifting through these bugs, and they've discovered like 30 new species of flies. They got to name them after the kids that live in the house. It was just a really fun citizen science initiative. And I covered that, and they gave me an Emmy for it. It's very cool. It's funny because they're like mini versions of the big Emmys that the big celebrities get. But I love it. I love it. We're up for a bunch more this year, so we'll see how it goes. We also won a LA Press Club Award and a Golden Mike Award for the work that we do on that show last year. So very lucky in that respect. And then the Knight Foundation reward was really cool. The Knight Foundation gave an award to Neil deGrasse Tyson for the work that he has done in his outreach. And a section of that award was called the Give Forward Award, or the Pay It Forward Award. I can't really remember specifically. And it was a $25,000 fellowship that Neil got to choose, who he kind of sees as somebody who is younger in the field and who's deserving of that that award. And he selected me, which was a real honor. So I went to New York, and we had this big celebration at the City University of New York's journalism school, and a nice dinner after. And yeah, it meant a lot.
Congratulations on that. She's Cara Santa Maria. I got to break out my Midwest accent and remember to say Cara Santa Maria when I say that, because I lo quiero si Santa Maria, si Cara Santa, cara mia cada dia, Cara Santa Maria.
That's what I got to say. That's what I always say, right? My name is so Italian. Cara means dear, beloved. Cara mia. And then Santa Maria, right? It's like the mother of God. I always say my name translates to dear mother of God. But you can say it so Italian, Cara Santa Maria, and then you add my middle name, and it becomes so Southern. Cara Louise. Get over here, Cara Louise.
Wheezy.
I'm both. Yep.
It's the Mythicist Milwaukee show. We are probably going to go over. We're talking to Cara here and approaching the 1 hour mark when the live feed cuts off, but we will continue talking because it does stay recorded, and then it'll be posted in its entirety except for the bits that we choose to edit out. Like when you said you weren't a celebrity, we're just gonna edit out the not. I'm a celebrity. But speaking of celebrities, who are you looking forward to meeting at the Reason Rally that you haven't ever met?
I don't know. I need to look through the list again. I mean, everybody's really excited about Johnny Depp, but we're not going to meet him, are we? I doubt it.
You probably
I bet
will.
you he stays. I don't know. I bet you he stays in his trailer.
It depends on what he wants to do.
Yeah.
It depends on everything. Depends on him.
Which, no complaints about that. I'm sure it's a hot mess for somebody in that kind of situation. But the funny thing is, so I am actually pretty new to the skeptical movement. I've been an atheist advocate for a long time. The skeptic circles really came about more with the Skeptics Guide to the Universe and being invited to come speak, but I don't know a lot of people in the movement. So it is really interesting looking through to see, okay, so I know Lawrence Krauss and I know Penn Jillette, and of course I know Bill Nye. I am really looking forward to meeting Carolyn Porco and spending hopefully some time with her because she is a big inspiration to me. She's, brilliant and very outspoken online, and I appreciate that about her. I really like how strong the minority game is this year.
Yeah.
We have so many African American speakers and big rap stars. We've got Method Man coming.
Thanks for bringing that up. We were actually instrumental in bringing the Wu-Tang members to it was,
oh, that's amazing.
I was lucky enough to work on the band search committee, and we went through a lot.
Well, we had
just a lot of rejections.
We had Killa Priest speak at a conference in Milwaukee, so it really opened up that network for us. And KP was on board and hooked up Rob with the rest of the Wu-Tang Clan. It's a pretty awesome story.
So hopefully,
I also love that is he an atheist and his name is Killa Priest? That makes
he basically is. Yeah, he enjoys the mythicism that we're involved in, and we do like to talk to our guests about that since we are mythicists primarily. Do you have any opinion on the historicity of Jesus and other biblical figures? Are you familiar with mythicism at all?
I've covered it to a very minor extent on different, when news articles will come out about it, I will do a lot of research around those articles and then maybe present them on Skeptics Guide or in other outlets. It's something that I straddle the line with because I still have this idea in the back of my head, for example, that one day I'm going to write a book about my Mormon upbringing, and I don't want to really sully the waters of that book by becoming too entrenched in the sort of research side of Mormonism. It's important that I hold on to how did it look to me when I came about understanding that none of this was true. It wasn't because I read a bunch of books by outsiders. It wasn't because I read a lot of research. It's I came into it on my own, and I've always wanted to make sure that I don't sully that. That said, I've read a lot about the historical Jesus, the idea of the historical Jesus, and I took a lot of courses in college when I was a philosophy minor. I was really into my religion courses, and I don't know, there's not a whole lot of evidence for it, but I don't staunchly believe that there was no Jesus. It seems quite likely to me that Jesus could have not even existed at all. There's a lot of controversy around the apostles, around all of the gospels coming out long after anybody who was actually there would have written them. And the apostles, of course, are all over the place, right? All the gospels don't mention all of them.
Right.
Some of them seem like they were just sort of made up. Some of them might have been real people. They might be real people that were, passed down so much that their stories became larger than life. I definitely don't believe that any of the, supernatural stuff happened.
Right.
Mm-hmm. We actually sponsor a debate series, and in October we're bringing together two of the biggest mythicist authors,
New Testament
to debate
scholars,
New Testament scholars to debate the actual historicity of Jesus on October 19th and
October 21st.
in Milwaukee. Dr. Robert Price and Bart Ehrman are going to debate that actual subject. So maybe
Cool.
maybe you'd like to join us for that. Come on out and
Yeah, that could be interesting.
we're going to decide right then. It'll be a matter of fact after the debate. We will know.
Yeah,
The debate will
then
be
we'll know,
over.
and then nobody will ever have to ask again.
That's right. Thank you. You get it finally. Someone
Yeah,
else.
I get it. I
No.
may be at QED in Manchester then. I can't remember exactly when that is, but I'm definitely going to the big Skeptic conference there.
Oh, that's awesome.
In October, and that should be
Nice.
really
Well,
fun.
that's what I found very impressive. Because I actually met you at a PastaCon years ago when we first started this. Yeah, you probably don't remember. It's a vague memory.
Oh no, she remembers you, Sean. Oh yeah.
Oh right.
I definitely remember you, Sean.
Right,
No, it was
right.
honestly probably my first Skeptic conference. I was probably like, "What's happening?" I'm so overwhelmed.
Well, that's interesting you say that because you look like you knew exactly what was happening, and you did the song with David Fitzgerald, which I thought was pretty funny.
Oh,
or
that was
the
funny. I remember
poem,
he asked me
yeah.
right before. He's like, "Can you read this in a sexy voice?" I was like, "Oh, okay."
Oh, it was so funny. It was his sex in the Bible bit that he does. But no, it was great. And I find it very impressive that you make time for those because, we hold conferences too, and it's hard getting people that, of your stature that have influence, that are celebrities, to come to the conferences. And I really applaud you for that. That's really cool that you do that.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a balance for sure. I basically started a new rule this past year because I was getting really overwhelmed. I was saying yes to way too many things. Generally speaking, I can't say yes to something if it's going to cost me out of pocket to do it. That's really difficult. But people ask me a lot to come do things that either don't pay or that have a small honorarium, something that actually makes it so that I have to take time off of my other work to be able to dedicate time to that. And I want to say yes to everything, but of course I can't. And so my agent helped me determine what a good line in the sand would be. So now I basically will do 3 gratis events a year.
Wow.
And that's my way to be able to both keep my sanity, but to also be able to do what I can do within the movement and not feel guilty when I do have to say no. Because then if somebody asks and I'm like, I'm sorry, I already gave away all 3, but if you come to me earlier next year, we can get it on the books.
Well, you
And
only
then I
have
don't
2
feel
left now because we got you.
No.
No, this doesn't count.
Well, no, that's I actually saw this. I don't think many people saw this interview when you're on Business Rock Stars.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
that was very interesting. A little strange, but
Yeah.
but one of the things that did come up, and this is where we're trying to challenge the secular community and event organizers such as ourselves. I mean, someone like you should not have to come for free. We should be able to pay people. We should be able to keep these things sustainable, and that comes from people that are attending events so many, historically, a lot of these conferences are free and things of that nature. But if you don't have a grant and you don't have a big fish investor, people have to understand. I mean, these things aren't free, and it's not that we're taking the money and we're running with it. It's we're paying people like you or Killer Priest or all these people to kind of keep this, more interesting and more interactive and fun.
Well, and to bring a draw, right? You
Right.
want to be able to fill the seats. You don't want to do a conference and then have it be half empty. And so when you have Bill Nye coming to your conference or you have Johnny Depp coming to speak, that's taking time out of the type of work that generally pays these people quite a bit of money. And sometimes you can do it for the love, but then you start to realize that everybody starts asking. So it's about finding boundaries. That's really all it is. It's about learning that it's okay to say no when you have to say no, and learning how to politely decline, and learning where that line in the sand is for you. I don't want to say I can't do anything if it doesn't pay, because that also makes me feel like I'm being selective about the audiences that I reach, and that's kind of unfair. But of course I have to put a cap on how
Right.
much I can do
Right.
that doesn't pay, because I'm a freelancer.
Right.
I don't have a boss. Every day I'm working to work, and every paycheck that I get is because between my agent and myself, we worked really hard to be able to book that gig and to be able to get the windfall from it. Sometimes I do very well in my endeavors, and sometimes I don't work for a month straight. It's a very challenging lifestyle working in entertainment.
Right, and as a science advocate as well, I mean, that's got to make it even tougher. I mean, that's
Oh, for sure, because where are the jobs? It's
Right.
like you have to be really, really creative in your approach. But it's true. This is something I've been struggling with. Last year, two friends of mine and I organized a science communicator retreat, like a little camp in Malibu where people could pay a very low fee to come and attend this camp for the weekend. And we did all sorts of good programming to help network and also to help improve SciComm across multiple platforms. And this year we want to keep going and we want to do it a little bit bigger, but we have to charge more because we're finding it's very hard to book good speakers or to book good workshop leaders if you can't pay them. We want to be able to pay them.
Right.
It's worthwhile. So we have to charge more and we have to do our due diligence and work really hard to get corporate sponsors. That's the important part, you know. If you can find somebody who says, I believe in this is important to me, and we'll give you $5,000 here, $10,000, even, you know, $1,000 here, that's a huge help.
Right.
A huge help.
Right. And that's our challenge to the secular community is, you know, everyone's so used to getting everything for free on the internet and things like that. I mean, these things are not easy, you know, just doing your podcast or doing your appearances, even us doing our podcast, all, you know, the films, everything else. It takes a lot of time, and we're all adults and we all have like real problems. So like, you know, that's, people out there need to understand, like, you know, if you like something, help financially support it, you know, because that's the only way it's going to keep going. Yeah, right.
And
exactly.
That's why Patreon has been so great. And I feel like I have so many great listeners of Talk Nerdy who just get it. At the top of the show every week, I thank my biggest supporters. And I always say the same thing because I hate asking for money and I feel really guilty doing it. But my shtick, which really works for me, is I will always ensure that Talk Nerdy is 100% free to download.
Yep.
Nobody should have to pay to listen to the show. If you can support the show, you are making it so that other people don't have to.
Yeah.
And it's because of you that I can stay on the air, and I really appreciate that. And I think the people who are in the position to help support, they get that. And I have some incredible, long-standing supporters who are just amazing. And I just thank them from the bottom of my heart every day.
She's Cara Santa Maria, and we are overtime because it's been so fabulous.
It's like overtime.
She's actually the leprechaun of atheism. She grants three
I really
visits a year, and you can't request more.
I really want to know what haven't you done, and what have you always wanted to do? Like what's coming up? What would be like your dream thing to work on?
I mean, for me, I think long form talk. I know it sounds cheesy, but that's like my dream. I would love to see a revamp of the way that we do talk shows in this country, whether it's late night, which I think late night really has its place and it's entertaining and whatever, but maybe even more daytime talk. I think that we have a tendency, like I kind of said before, to speak down to our audiences. You see, daytime talk is oftentimes geared towards women and it's really vapid. And there's
true.
Not a lot of good insight that's being given. And I think that we have a lot of real thinkers out there. So when I'm developing new shows with networks and with production companies, sometimes I work on shows that have gimmicks. I work on shows about digging up dinosaurs, or I work on shows about, you know, astronomy, or then I work on more general shows about going around and learning about the human condition and blah, blah, blah. But I do think a good standby would just be a solid, smart, interesting, young, progressive, and I'll say smart again, show where just interesting people sit down and talk about interesting things. I think that we're seeing a movement where people want that. We are a podcast nation now, and I think that people will respond well to that, but the networks aren't quite up to speed. So one day.
How has Vice not scooped you up yet?
I've done a little bit for Vice. You know, I did a branded deal with Vice, actually. It was a GE branded series about the future. So one of the episodes was How Will We See the Invisible? Another one was How Will We Stay Connected? What's the future of love? And I'll tell you what an incredible experience. My director of photography, my B camera operator, my sound person, and my associate producer, all female.
Awesome.
It was the weirdest thing. I've never experienced that in my life. And we traveled the country in a big 16-passenger bus with all of our gear and all of our equipment. And there was 6 of us, you know, or 5 of us, no, 6 including me, all female, just being girls, like making really solid programming. And honestly, when I watch these videos, I'm just taken aback. They're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. They're some of the best work I've done.
Well, I got to check that out. I apologize. I didn't
like
see
it.
that. Yeah.
No. I've done so many like little things here and there. It's like impossible to keep up. But definitely, if you're going to watch, I recommend starting with How Will We See the Invisible? It's stunning.
Awesome.
Yeah, we appreciate your time, and jump off any time you need to. I do have a couple more questions, and we thank you for
That's
hanging
fine. We can
in
probably
there.
go another 10 minutes.
Awesome.
I'm good with that.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, you've mentioned the parallel a couple of times between our movement here and the LGBT experience of recent. And I'm a guy who's always drawn those parallels. And I go right back to women's rights in the early part of the last century and the African American civil rights movement. And now, more recently, the LGBT movement. Is this, in fact, the next civil rights movement, or am I, as some people have admonished me, kind of overplaying that?
I don't think so. I think it is. I think it's just slower. I think that it's a little offensive to individuals who worked in the civil rights movement. So I get that when we talk about this being a new civil rights movement, because civil rights we know is an all-encompassing term that talks about ensuring that we have our constitutionally bound rights afforded to everybody. And we know that there have been huge problems around that historically. But when we talk about the civil rights movement, we're talking about the rights for African Americans to vote. We're talking about the rights for African Americans to vote freely. That was the next really big hurdle. And we're talking about the rights for African Americans to have liberty the way that the white majority has had for so long. The civil rights movement historically was a thing, but it is still a thing. It's not over. We do not have racial equality in this country by any stretch of the imagination. And we're still working very hard to ensure that, underrepresented minorities are treated on equal footing in this country. It does not happen. And so I think when we in the atheist community or the skeptic community talk about this is our civil rights movement, apples to apples, we have to be careful. Some people have experienced violence. Some people have, been killed within the atheist or skeptic community. But I think that we don't want to minimize what happened, the horrific atrocities that happened during the civil rights movement. We also don't want to minimize the fact that as atheists, we've never, especially white male atheists, which I'm not, but many people are, we've never struggled with the right to vote. Sure, we have a hard time getting elected, and that's our next big hurdle. So I think it's important to maintain perspective, but to also understand that, yes, atheists get a raw ass deal in this country. And that's why I'm an activist. We have to work to ensure that we can have atheist voices in Congress, that we could have atheist voices in the Oval Office one day. We have to ensure that the religious privilege that's written into our laws is systematically repealed so that children are kept safe and so that individuals have a right to their liberties regardless of, what they practice. I'm a constitutionalist in that way, and I think that's important. But when we talk about the civil rights movement specifically, I think that we just have to be gentle and careful in our speech because the civil rights movement was something that was horrific and inspirational and incredible. And I don't want to minimize it by saying my struggle was just like that, because it's absolutely not.
Wow.
What about this will be my last question, I think, unless you guys have something to add. What about women in particular in the movement? That's a hot topic sometimes too? Sexism, chauvinism, outright abuse, or what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, just inequality,
misogyny, inappropriate behavior. Is that a thing? What do you see there?
I'm a feminist. People ask me about that. Ooh, do you use the scary word feminist? I'm a feminist. I think who I have the biggest problems with are no, that's not true. I can't say the biggest problems. Who I have a problem with lately is this new movement that we're seeing. It frustrates me because it divides me. So we're seeing a new movement of liberals who are attacking what they call the regressive left. And I get it. And I think it's important because I'm not a member of the regressive left in the sense that I stand up for civil liberties the world over. And I'm not afraid to talk about the problems of Islam. And I'm not, an Islamophobe. I think that's a terrible term that's been coined that is not wholly appropriate oftentimes of the people that are called Islamophobes, like Sam Harris, for example, or Christopher Hitchens was. I'm very open about that. I'm also a feminist. And I think what we're seeing is that this super left progressive movement that is lashing out against individuals within their own party and calling them regressive leftists lump feminists into that group. This always happens when there's a movement and when there's interesting people doing interesting things that are important for a cause. Other people will glom onto that and they'll utilize the legwork that they've done. And so what you see now is these horrifically misogynistic people glomming onto that movement and using it as a platform to denigrate women. And that's where I have a big problem, because I am incredibly liberal and I have a hard time with the regressive left as well. I am not one of them. We took a big hit at the SGU after basically people use the term deplatforming. I hate that word, but like repealing, Dawkins' invitation after he tweeted some rhetoric that was absolutely disgusting. Now, granted, we got a lot of backlash from and I had no decision on that. I'm not on the board. I had no saying in any of this, but I was there for the conversations. We had some backlash from the skeptic community. Ultimately, he was reinvited to talk about this very issue. He's obviously still very sick after suffering his stroke. So I doubt that he'll be there at Nexus next week. Who knows? But that said, again, you were talking about skeptics. You need to understand that like these conferences aren't free, that you have to pay your part if you want to see this big production. You also have to understand that we can't throw a conference where the speakers actively say things that will prevent women from wanting to come to the conference.
Right.
Like you have to think about it in the mindset of an organizer, right? Like you're basically implicitly endorsing these people by having them come and be your keynotes. And then when they do and say things that you as a brand don't align with, and fear will scare people away from attending, especially on such a hot topic, it's a hard decision to make. It doesn't, I think people get confused when they start talking about free speech, and they think that it extends to things that aren't free speech. Like, I have the right to tell somebody not to say something in my own living room in front of my kids, which I don't have kids, but if that were the case. Like, I have the right to pick and choose what I listen to. And I will defend to the death your right to say something that disagrees with me, but I may not invite you onto my show.
Right.
That's my choice.
Right.
And I think that these are the complicated issues that we need to start talking about more. And the problem is we have sort of established a space where a lot of women don't feel safe. But I also think that we as women need to speak up and talk about what that means. And it's hard because, like I said, people aren't monolithic.
Sounds like you found your reason rally speech.
Oh gosh, that's going to be a lot of work. I got to think about that for sure. Well, it's true. I don't want to feel like I'm going to get raped when I'm at a conference.
Right.
And they're just little things that we don't think about because historically it was always dudes.
Right.
So I go to a conference. It is not uncommon when it's a small conference. Somebody says, we want you to come speak. And they give me my hotel room. And I realize you can see my room from where we just left that all the conference attendees were. And I'm like, well, you need to put your speakers in an adjacent hotel. You can't put your female speakers in the same hotel where anybody could follow them back to their room. It's like you don't think about these safety concerns and you don't think about these risks. But there are a lot of people in the movement who are not necessarily nefarious, but who don't understand personal space. And this is something that I've struggled with, where I'm like, okay, I don't think this guy is like dangerous, but I have to figure out how to say, I'm really uncomfortable with you putting your hand there, or I'm really uncomfortable with you talking so close to me. And then I feel bad. I feel guilty because I want this to be an only positive experience, and I don't want to have to be my own bodyguard.
That's a great point. We've seen that with the community organizing. It's so true. You get all types, and
it's hard. It's hard.
Well, I guess I'm going to throw you one real quick before we get off. So we just did we're shooting the movie in Milwaukee. We finally found a church to partner with, and we had someone come, atheist activist out of Chicago, Melissa Pugh. She came up to the filming. We did inside of a church, and she was dressed as Wonder Woman to go with like the Batman theme that we're doing. And we are downtown Milwaukee, and so I actually had one of our staff escort her. She had to go pay for her car, so she didn't get a ticket. I had one of our staff escort her to her car, and she was like, "No, you don't need to do that. I'm fine by myself." Now, it was a weird situation for me because, like, no, I'd rather have you have an escort.
Yeah.
But then I also was like in the position where, you know, I'm a feminist as well. So I tend to treat people equally. But in this case, just knowing the neighborhood and things like that, I did have her have an escort. How would you like? What is your opinion on that scenario?
That's a tough situation because so you can look at it from both perspectives. One perspective is if you say, do you want somebody to walk you to her car? And she says no. You're like, okay, well, you can walk to your car on your own. The other perspective is I'm responsible for your well-being. Excuse me. I'm responsible for your well-being because you're here at my event.
Right.
You know, and like basically you're kind of in my employ right now. It gets hazy with the laws, but if I'm on a shoot and for example, this is a good one. I'm always telling a lot of my production, I'll just Uber. And people are like, yeah, that's fine. But I worked on one production once where my production coordinator was like really paranoid about Uber because she was, you know, obsessively reading about all of the reports of people. Oh, sorry, that's my dog.
No, it's okay.
She was obsessively reading about all of the reports of people like getting assaulted in Ubers and things like that. And she was kind of like, not on my watch. Like, you are working on the show. I am responsible for your well-being. Like, I'm getting you a car. You're not riding in an Uber. And in my mind, I was like, okay. But also I get it. It's their show. So I see it from both perspectives. If you are responsible for if you're in a position where you could get sued if something went wrong,
right,
you're in a position where you need to do what you can do to make sure you don't get sued. And I'm not saying that was your reasoning at all, but I think that it is something you have to think about.
Yeah, and I don't want to see someone get hurt. You know, something.
Of course, and you don't want to see somebody get hurt.
Right.
But maybe I would challenge you to extend that to anybody else on that's there. You know, if there's a young man who has to go run and get something, and you're like, well, this isn't a great neighborhood, and I'm a little concerned because he's carrying expensive equipment or whatever.
Oh yeah,
maybe
we definitely would do that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe he should also
time.
have. And then it's easier because when she says no, it's okay. You say it's just kind of our policy. Like we just always make sure that people have an escort when we're, you know, filming in a neighborhood that's that we don't fully know.
Right? Exactly. Yeah.
Cara Santa Maria, thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Check her out every Saturday morning on Fox on FabLab, doing great work, spreading the better news about science education, and appearing at Reason Rally on June 4th. Check her out there, and look forward to meeting you. You and I will kick in Johnny Depp's door together.
There you go.
Yeah. Perfect.
Cara, thanks so much. The link we'll send to you when it comes out. And again, appreciate your time.
Cool. And then, we'll promote it over here.
For
Thank
sure.
you.
That's awesome.
Have a great rest of the weekend.
Thanks, guys. We'll see ya.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Fantastic stuff. Cara Santa Maria.
Fantastic,
I could talk to her all afternoon, but it's getting late. Time to go.
I can't believe she gave us that much time, actually. That was really, really awesome of her.
Yeah, fantastic.
Can you imagine what her day is like?
No, seriously. No, please.
I mean, it would be insane.
She had to cancel something just now.
It was Mother's Day, too. Like, that's the other thing, you know. Like
an absolute inspiration.
Her dog reminded her that she had something to do.
Right,
Feed the dog.
Right. Yeah.
Check us out on Tuesday. We have Karen Garst coming to Tuesday night discussion group remotely to she's the faithless feminist. We've had her on the podcast, fascinating and right up our alley with the mythicism, talking about the missing goddess.
From the goddess to God.
From goddess to God, how talking about misogyny and whatnot, how the patriarchal society of yore kind of crowbarred the feminine divine out of our sacred stories.
It's a free event. Come downtown Milwaukee.
We do that every other Tuesday, and this is the Tuesday. We do a lot of stuff.
Exciting.
Trivia on Thursdays. Check that out. Look for us at on meetup.com, the Milwaukee Atheists, Skeptics, and Humanists page. And find us on all the social media. It's Mythicist Milwaukee. We're out there. Support us when you can, and thanks for joining. We will see you all next week. Bye, everybody.